This king was downright miserable. 3 years of effort, hundreds of sons, yet not a single daughter. So he ruthlessly spent 50 cents to abduct a wizard to cast a spell, hoping for a little princess. That day happened to be when Fizbia Hilly went into labor. King Wit was full of anticipation, placing all his hopes on the princess about to arrive. With a loud wah, a cry rang out and a rainbow burst across the sky. I arrived in this world stark naked, paraded around like a priceless treasure. The king was delighted at the sight of me and reached out to pull me into a loving hug. No one noticed the dark look on Fizbia's face. She clutched the pearl necklace at her throat, then snapped it, sending the pearls scattering across the floor. At the same time, the midwife excitedly carried me toward the king. Unfortunately, she stepped on a pearl and suddenly slipped. I was flung straight through the air. I clutched my tiny blanket for dear life, nearly scaring my own father to death. Was I really about to be smashed to pieces right after being born? At that moment, a flash went off in my mind. Flower petals filled the air as a small mouse with an over-the-top expression and sunglasses leapt out. At the same time, streams of information began to gather. In my previous life, I died suddenly after staying up late reading novels that I never imagined I'd transmigrate into a book, and into the body of a baby no less. But what was with this flashy, arrogant little mouse? It could even freeze time. That wasn't in the book at all. The mouse introduced itself as the universe's most invincible, super cute, super handsome princess system. Curious, I reached out and rubbed the system. That you're just a useless little mouse, aren't you? Touch once for 10 gold coins. What kind of nonsense is that? Come on then. Barefoot and fearless, I poke. When the little mouse started transforming, I finally began to believe. It seemed no one but me could see it, so in my current situation I probably wasn't going to die from the fall. The system mouse then prompted me. Of course, host. All you need to do is pay 10 gold coins to save yourself. I was overjoyed. My life was finally secured. What came next from the princess system completely stunned me. 3 choices. The first option cost 1 gold coin. Father would be a king who hated women and killed them on sight. That scared this princess into rejecting it immediately. The second cost 50 gold coins. Father would be a son-favoring king. He wouldn't kill women, but to him they'd be worth less than ants. No way. This princess refused to live that kind of life. The third cost 100 gold coins for safety. Father would become a crazed daughter-loving king, and I'd be his one and only precious little princess. My Kazalin big eyes blinked again and again. This one. This is the one. The moment I spoke, the princess system jumped 3 feet into the air. Payment successful. Please wait a moment, host. Then it flashed a sleazy grin. Host, your total spending is 110 gold coins. Your current balance is 50 gold coins. Suddenly, something felt off. I in this world, my father was already a hardcore daughter lover. So how could he possibly let me fall to my death? You money-grubbing rat. How dare you scam my precious gold coins? Was my fate really this terrible? In my last life, I died suddenly from staying up all night reading novels. After finally being reborn into a good family as a king's daughter, before enjoying even a shred of luxury, was I really going to be smashed to death right after birth? The pain I expected never came. Instead, a warm current wrapped around me. The king's face was dark, and only the faint glow around his hand proved he was casting magic to save me. I widened my Kazalin big eyes. Holy crap, I really hit the jackpot. This king dad actually used magic just for me. After all, for certain reasons he could only use magic 10 times a year. Just look at the expressions on the concubines' faces. Envy and jealousy were written all over them. The king didn't care at all. It seemed there was nothing he wouldn't do for me. He held me tightly, casting a cold gaze down upon everyone else. This confirmed my suspicion once again. My father truly was a full-on daughter fanatic. My heart was racing, my hands were trembling. I really struck gold. It seemed the little mouse system hadn't lied. Our deal from the previous episode had truly been fulfilled. Father gently supported my head, his face filled with unmistakable affection. That warm and tender look filled me with hope for the future. Just then his expression darkened. Damn it, such an adorable child, she almost died from that fall. As he spoke, he moved to drag the stunned midwife down. The midwife hurriedly knelt, explaining over and over, "Mercy, your majesty, mercy." A pearl rolled under my feet. I accidentally stepped on it and fell toward your little princess. The king glanced at the shining pearls on the floor, a thoughtful look crossing his face. But before the midwife could finish explaining, Father coldly ordered his men to investigate who dropped the pearls, and to execute both that person and the midwife together. Seeing that the truth had been exposed, Fizbia panicked. She quickly dropped to her knees and begged for mercy. Though I was baffled by my father's brain wiring, I still hoped she'd commit fewer sins and build up some virtue. I had just been born and couldn't speak, so I could only wail loudly, trying to divert Father's attention. Father really did fall for it, or perhaps thought his stern look had scared me. By sheer coincidence, their lives were spared. I could already imagine it. In his world, besides doting on his daughter, there was nothing left but eating, drinking, and bathroom breaks. Just as everyone was praising the king's mercy, the queen wore a chilling expression. Blissfully unaware, I didn't know she was already plotting a vicious plan, intending to harm my brothers and sisters. This guy was seriously warped. Who goes around modifying a newborn? With a casual wave of his hand, I was wrapped in another warm current. Then my hair suddenly grew long that I was completely stunned. What kind of princess has waist-length hair on day one? He looked at me with a sneaky grin, clearly admiring his own masterpiece. Nearby, the queen nearly spat blood, so furious she almost killed that dog of an emperor on the spot. Your Majesty, don't forget, you can only cast magic 10 times a year. If a powerful enemy attacks and you're out of magic, the kingdom will fall. But my father didn't care. Making my daughter prettier matters more than anything else. That line nearly made my fur stand on end. Father, are you saying I wasn't pretty before? Have you ever seen a newborn with waist-length hair who isn't beautiful? If that's ugly, then the whole family is ugly. What happened next completely shattered my understanding of what it meant to be a father. As I stood there dumbfounded, that dazzling glow of magic flared up once again. A bad feeling rose in my heart, and then I turned into this. Father actually thought I was too small and decided to make me bigger. Just because you can use magic, you think you're amazing? 1,000 unspeakable curses thundered through my mind. You bastard, have you ever seen a baby this big? The big jerk leaned in to inspect me as if weighing whether I'd gone too far. Then he pulled a face like he'd eaten a rotten egg. Ugh, this is a total flop. Forget it. So ugly. Change her back. At this point, I was completely numb to him and could only clench my tiny fists in protest. I was picked up and put down again, toyed with in every possible way. After careful evaluation, I concluded this wretched old man was bad. Really, really bad. Can you imagine it? The lunatic then turned my hair into rainbow colors. Worse still, he didn't like it and changed the color again. Mom, where are you? Please come save me. I'm going to be played to death by this guy. By now, the king had used magic 6 times in a row, and the queen looked as if she'd been tortured for 6 rounds, barely human anymore. Even the concubines were at their wits' end. Your Majesty, if this keeps up, you'll kill the little princess. The loyal guards were in tears. Your Majesty, you only have 4 uses of magic left. If unexpectedly, the king's expression hardened. Enough noise. I've said it. Making the little princess beautiful is the top priority. With that, he grabbed me and shot straight into the sky, leaving everyone far behind. I'm going to take a look at the little princess of the kingdom of Ghana. I hear she's very beautiful. At those words, everyone present collapsed to the ground. This was already the 7th use of magic. Truly, beauty brings ruin to nations. Being carried through the air wasn't pleasant for me either. I was being squeezed so hard I was barely breathing. Was I really going to die on my very first day of life? I had just been born, yet my dad carried me everywhere to show me off. Simply because he'd had hundreds of sons and not a single daughter. He didn't bother hiding his affection for me at all. The entire day was spent holding me up and bragging to everyone. When King Lake saw how my father was holding his daughter, he exploded on the spot. He snatched me away and cursed my father like a pig. The princess was just born and you're holding her like this. Are you trying to shorten her lifespan? By then, I had already been tossed around by my father to the point of near death. Honestly, from the moment I was born today, my inner world had completely collapsed. Was this really the doting dad the system gave me? He looked more like an idiot dad. Thankfully, King Lake immediately ordered his son to fetch the royal physician and hurried off together. He even begged King Kale to save this little sister. Otherwise, he'd never marry for the rest of his life. Watching the two of them play off each other, my father stood frozen like stone. Babies can't actually be held upright? King Kale explained with a pained expression. You don't understand. When holding a baby, never support them like that. Their heads are soft and it can cause a concussion. And you even used magic to fly her around. Her spine has probably been injured. Only then did father realize how serious it was, asking in panic whether it would affect my growth in the future. Sigh, how could there be such a clueless dad? If my soul hadn't transmigrated, all your ridiculous stunts would have turned your daughter into a brain-damaged child long ago. At that moment, the little Prince Shichi hurried over with the royal physician. Before he even reached us, the physician lashed out angrily. Which heartless lunatic would dare injure such a tiny infant like this? My father rolled his eyes as if pierced by countless arrows, yet had no strength to argue back. After examining my injuries, the physician said, The little princess has a severe neck fracture. Surgery must be performed immediately. Seeing my handsome brother so worried about me, I really wanted to hug him and comfort him. But I felt awful myself that I was only on my first day of life and I already needed surgery? What kind of fate is this? This princess has it way too rough. Born today and already facing the knife, while dad only cares about whether I'll look ugly after the operation. That I thought I'd explode in rage, but all that remained in the princess's heart was a sigh. My dad is truly a disaster. You just had to carry me around showing me off, snapping my neck in the process. Now here I am, only 7 hours old, heading into surgery. That if anything happens to me, you'd better be ready to drown in everyone's spit. Little mouse, come out right now. That I this the daughter-loving dad you promised me. Just as I was cursing in my head, the punchable little mouse's voice appeared. Gloating, it said, "Ah, host, your father really is a daughter fanatic. It's just that the way he loves you is kind of stupid. Princess, you should first think about how to earn gold coins. That way you can exchange them with this system for anything you want. I guarantee that as long as you successfully win over the king and gain more affection points, you'll be able to turn the tables. Of course, it has to be the right kind of affection. You can't let him dote on you like an idiot and wreck you again." The little princess looked at the mouse thoughtfully. "Tell me, before me the king had hundreds of children. Why did holding me just once end up like this?" The mouse put on a sleazy grin. "Because he doesn't like princes. That's why he never personally held those hundreds of princes even once. You're the only child he's ever held himself." Happy? Surprised? The little princess nearly rolled her eyes when she heard that. Scenes of her brothers kneeling before father, never once held by him, slowly surfaced in her mind. Such kindness was truly more than she could bear. When her consciousness returned to her body, the neighboring kingdom's prince, Shichi, was standing guard by her side. He looked at her with open admiration, seemingly amazed that she hadn't cried throughout the entire surgery. Thinking about it made the princess's head ache. It was all that money-grubbing little mouse's fault. Before the surgery, it had told her there was no anesthesia in this world, warning her that the procedure would be extremely painful and might even cause her to lose consciousness. In the end, that so-called painless mega capsule scammed the little princess out of a full 130 gold coins. The angrier she got, the more she forgot she had just undergone surgery. She restlessly twisted her neck and a sharp crack rang out, turning Prince Shichi pale with shock. He panicked and ran off, about to shout for the royal physician. The little princess's neck seems broken again. But the princess, numb to pain after buying the capsule, had no idea what was happening. "It snapped just from turning my neck twice. I really don't want another surgery." At that moment, a sinister figure approached her. He muttered softly, "If her neck's broken, dying suddenly now probably wouldn't raise suspicion." A completely unfamiliar face came into her view. There wasn't a shred of emotion in those eyes. With no one around and no strength to resist, was she really going to be killed just hours after being born? No way. This princess wasn't going to be taken out so easily. She used all her strength to shove the boy's arm aside, grabbed the railing with both hands and kicked hard with her little feet, then leapt down in one desperate move, hoping to draw someone's attention. This completely terrified the inexperienced third brother. That he screamed at the top of his lungs, "This is terrifying. I'm going to find mother." The poor little princess lay there in an awkward posture, completely motionless. Thankfully, the commotion quickly drew the king and the royal physician over. Seeing the little princess fallen on the ground, the daughter-loving king's rage meter instantly maxed out. The physician hurriedly used magic to lift me up and began a careful examination. With a grave expression, he said, "Nearly every bone in the little princess's body has been broken by the fall." However, the little princess, who had bought the princess system's mega pill, felt absolutely nothing. The king picked me up and asked the physician in lingering fear, "Is it serious?" The physician looked at the king like he was an idiot, but could only bring himself to say, "Extremely serious." Hearing this, the king flew into a rage and was about to order an investigation, vowing to bite the culprit to death on the spot. After that, he gently looked at me. "I'm sorry that it's all daddy's fault for not protecting you." Then he raised his head and asked the physician, "But my darling doesn't look that bad, does she?" The physician replied solemnly, "The little princess's reaction is indeed abnormal. I suspect she injured her brain in the fall and may be mentally impaired." That single sentence nearly choked both father and daughter to death. The king grabbed the little princess and lifted her up. "Darling, you didn't really become brain damaged, did you?" The princess was speechless. If this were the 21st century, this man would absolutely be a quack doctor. Inside, she screamed, "I'm fine. You're the brain-damaged one." As she thought that, she scratched hard at the king's face. The king's head snapped back from the blow, and he burst out laughing. "As expected of my little princess. bones broken and she can still scratch people. Just then Brother Shichi, who had rushed over, shouted anxiously, "Uncle, please save my little sister. She's bleeding so much, can't you two see it?" The little princess froze. As someone who had transmigrated from the 21st century, she knew a baby only had about a pound of blood in total. Letting it drip away like this, tell me, how am I supposed to survive? Yet the little princess's head shook like a rattle. If she hadn't jumped off the bed to save herself and broken her neck, would she even need this quack for a second surgery? This damn system only thought about scamming my precious gold coins day after day, driving me straight into bankruptcy. Completely useless. But the kingdom's top royal physician had already stepped forward. His gentle, child-soothing words sounded to the princess like whispers from hell, eerily similar to doctors saying it won't hurt back in her childhood. Seeing the little princess faint from sheer terror, the king shouted in panic. The physician approached her with his own bizarre, self-created steps. Then he spoke solemnly to the king. "The little princess is too badly injured to withstand surgery. She can only be placed into magical hibernation." The king looked at her with deep concern, only to learn from the physician that this hibernation would last 10 whole years. They say a daughter is her father's little lover. At that moment he truly couldn't accept it. Meanwhile, the true culprit, Fizbia, wore a dark expression as well. She had given the king hundreds of children, yet he had never once held a son. Now he planned to spend 10 hours every day using magic to nourish this barely breathing little princess. If it were her own son who'd been injured, he'd probably have kicked him away long ago. How infuriating! Did His Majesty really treasure having a daughter that much? Elsewhere, the king murmured to himself, 10 years of hibernation. That would drain me of magic completely. But after 10 years, would she still be this adorable? The royal physician answered honestly, no, her body will continue to grow, but her mind will stop developing. The king spat out a mouthful of blood on the spot. He clenched his fists tightly. My precious child, will I truly never feel your cuteness again? Even if I pour out all my magic, I still can't save you. Becoming mentally impaired, is that truly inevitable? At that moment, Fizbia burst through the door, clearly trying to stop this absurd decision. All the kings signed an agreement. No one may use magic more than 10 times a year. Your Majesty, have you forgotten? King Wit replied calmly, so what if I use all 10? This little girl is already mentally impaired anyway. Get out of my way. When this year's 10 uses are gone, I'll use last year's. The year before that, even earlier ones. Even if I burn through every last reserve I've saved for my little princess, what does it matter if I break treaties and make enemies of all nations? Fizbia coughed up blood. She collapsed to the floor, trembling. Mad. Completely mad. This king has lost his mind and I can't let that little girl survive. She gripped her son's supporting hand so hard it cracked, feeling nothing at all. She was determined to make sure the princess died during this period. Yet the unconscious little princess knew none of this, still dreaming of waking up, watching videos and waiting for likes. This princess truly had it rough, born today and already a living corpse. Yet the poisonous woman kept pressing forward step by step. For 3 full years she fed her an ice-cold exotic poison day after day, determined to kill her. What she didn't know was that every drop of poison was absorbed by the princess system, then refined into pure energy and continuously injected into the little princess's body. A quantitative change triggered a qualitative shift, allowing the princess to awaken. The next day, a figure crept over quietly, only to be recognized instantly by the princess system. It was this very troublemaker who had caused the princess to be shattered and forced into magical hibernation back then. 3 years had passed in the blink of an eye. Had she come to cause trouble again? Yet there was no intense malice on her face. Instead, it looked more like remorse and guilt. Even the princess system was shocked. Could the little princess really turn someone from evil to good? Just then a sudden change occurred. The moment that person was about to touch the mark on the princess's forehead, the little princess seemed to sense it, her eyelashes trembling softly. In the next instant, her eyes snapped open, and the first thing she saw was that sinister face from 3 years ago. Terror flooded her as she felt the entire world was hostile toward her. Accompanied by the princess's scream, boundless cold surged violently from her body, as if it were about to freeze the entire royal palace. At the same time, Fizbia ran toward the king in shock, shouting, "Something's wrong, something's wrong." But it was already too late. Those black stockings she'd worn for 2 years without them tearing froze solid in an instant. She remained locked in place, frozen mid-dive. Upon the throne, Wit casually crossed his legs, flames bursting to life in his palm. No matter who it is, anyone who dares to cast magic within the palace shall die. The 2 streams of energy collided violently, lingering in the air for a long time without dispersing. The pressure on Fizbia suddenly eased and she finally stammered. It was the little princess. She used ice element magic. Hearing this, the king instantly withdrew his power, then broke into a foolish grin. As expected of my daughter. She's incredible. The princes nearby were completely speechless. Who was it that had just sworn to kill anyone abusing magic? Meanwhile, the little princess was still spinning around in panic, completely unaware that she had nearly destroyed the entire palace. Having just awakened, everything around her felt utterly unfamiliar. Even when her father rushed to her side, she failed to recognize him. Seeing that the princess hadn't died, the three Fizbia were utterly stunned. The king felt nothing but joy at his daughter's awakening and couldn't stop praising his precious girl for being so powerful at such a young age. As he spoke, his gaze softened and he leaned in, about to give her a loving kiss. The little princess, however, wore a gloomy expression. She spoke calmly. "Who are you, looking to die?" A little girl who had been unconscious for 3 years waking up and threatening to kill her own father instantly terrified the onlookers. It was pure treason. Yet the king didn't mind at all and patiently explained, "Silly girl, I'm your father." Watching the king pucker up with that so-called aged kiss and lean in again, the princess looked utterly disgusted. Wasn't this father a bit too shameless? Just look around. The Fizbia were practically coughing up blood from embarrassment. The king snorted coldly. "They're just jealous that I have a daughter. You're my precious treasure, understand?" The little princess froze, and the ice flower mark on her forehead gradually faded as clarity returned to her eyes. She asked uncertainly, "Fa father?" Seeing that his daughter finally recognized him, the king leaned in again for another kiss. The princess shoved him away at once. "Shoo shoo, old man, don't do that." Then she shook her head hard, trying to piece together what had just happened. At that moment, the princess system suddenly appeared. "Host, you didn't lose your memory. You were asleep for 3 years. Just now, you awakened a skill and went into a minor rampage. Once you master it, there won't be any issues." The little princess felt awkward. "Damn it, father. 3 years ago, was it you who broke your daughter's neck?" The king hurriedly looked up at the sky, cold sweat pouring down. Do kids really remember things that early? He then forced a laugh at the princess. "Tell me, who made you go berserk just now? I'll deal with them immediately." The princess was speechless. "He's dead, you old man. Can you stop changing the subject?" Hearing this, George suddenly dropped to his knees. "Father, please spare me. It wasn't me, really it wasn't." His head hit the floor with loud thuds, while Fizbia's expression grew increasingly grim. At that moment, the royal physician stepped forward. "Your Majesty, the little princess was poisoned with an ice-cold exotic toxin. But this child doesn't seem like the kind who would administer such poison." At the same time, Bia's face turned deathly pale. The poisoning had finally been exposed. Unluckily for her, George cried out to his mother, desperately begging her to save him. Fearing she'd be dragged down with him, Bia slapped him hard, then immediately pinned the crime on him. "It was you. Who else could it be? You're the only one here." George was stunned. "Mother, I'm your son. How could you do this?" Knowing that delay would only make things worse, Fizbia snatched an 8-meter-long blade from a guard and raised it to strike George down. She intended to silence him before the king could interrogate him, leaving no witnesses and no evidence behind. In the split second before George gave up all hope, the little princess leapt forward, standing righteously in front of him. Fizbia's eyes turned vicious. "If you insist on dying, then I'll grant your wish." This utterly terrified the boy. Thinking back on the past 3 years, he had lived like a dog kept on a leash, driven back and forth by his vicious mother, forced to commit countless misdeeds. Yet he was still tormented and never dared to resist. Perhaps this was simply his fate. His heart turned to ash as he resolved to shoulder all the crimes alone. The king sensed that something was amiss, unaware that the boy was merely a scapegoat pushed forward by the Fizbia. Afraid that delay would spell disaster, Fizbia drew her blade to silence him. If the king's suspicion turned toward her, it would all be over. The little princess saw everything clearly. In truth, George was not the one who had harmed her. Suddenly, she leapt out of the king's arms, startling George, who had already resigned himself to death, into stunned disbelief. For a moment, the king panicked like an ant on a hot pan. Fizbia, on the other hand, wore a ruthless smile, even seeing an opportunity to accidentally kill the princess. She looked almost euphoric, as if drugged. Just then, the little princess raised one small hand, and the temperature around them plummeted. Blade in hand, Bia was frozen solid in an instant, terror etched across her face. Even the princess herself was dumbfounded. Good heavens! Do I really have the power to freeze bad people instantly? She looked at the frozen, stunned Fizbia, then pulled a playful face. Hey auntie, no hurting George, okay? Bia exploded in rage. Wasn't this brat still supposed to be mentally impaired after waking up? Why is her mouth so vicious? The little princess suddenly felt playful. She cupped a hand to her ear. Auntie, what did you say? The wind's too loud, I can't hear you. With a casual wave, she froze Bia solid. The queen and the others looked worried. His Majesty already favors girls. And now this brat can use such powerful magic. This is troublesome. We must find a way to get rid of this child. Meanwhile, the little princess clung to the king's leg, acting cute. Father, I really like this big brother. Please don't kill him, okay? The king had never seen anything like this. He was instantly overwhelmed by her cuteness, secretly grateful he had a daughter. Otherwise he'd regret it for life. Just as the king was about to pardon George, Bia trembled and spoke again. Your Majesty, you mustn't. Before she could finish, the princess waved her hand and slapped an ice mask onto her face. The king scooped the little princess up. All right, my precious girl is so kind that if you say spare him, then he lives. Saying that, the king took the princess for a medical checkup. Everything seemed to be moving in a good direction, but would she really let the princess go so easily? Watching the king leave, Bia finally breathed a sigh of relief. That was close. I nearly lost my life. Scene change. The little princess lay peacefully on a soft, luxurious bed. At the same time, the royal physician entered the room. With a kindly smile, he said, Chili, please sleep peacefully. Allow this old minister and his Majesty to examine your body properly. In her dreams, the princess saw a night of torrential rain. She was curled up on the ground as a man in worn clothes held an umbrella over her and said, Chili, come home with dad. But the little princess shoved the man away and shouted, Go away. I don't want you to be my dad. Other people's dads are amazing. Why are you so useless? Ignoring his attempts to stop her, she ran off in tears, watching her small figure disappear into the distance. The man stood frozen in place, the umbrella slipping from his hand and falling to the ground. Yeah, Chili, why is dad so useless? And yet he had truly tried so hard, to give her the best life he could. Back in reality, the little princess slept for 3 full days. When she finally woke, she shot upright in bed. No matter how hard she tried, she couldn't remember who the girl in her dream was, despite how familiar she had felt. At that moment, the king at her bedside noticed she had awakened, and immediately leaned in to plant a loving kiss on her. The princess instinctively disliked that kind of affection, but from the royal physician she learned that the king hadn't left her side for a single step during her 3-day coma. She froze for a moment, staring at this utterly devoted, daughter-obsessed father. Somehow she felt that her father looked a lot like the man from her dream. Could it be that the man she dreamed of was his past life? Unfortunately, the king's thought process went in a completely different direction. He pulled the princess straight into his arms. He had mistaken her expression for concern over him. The one who suffered, however, was the princess. Nearly suffocating, she complained inwardly, I might not be a warm little jacket, but you're definitely a faceless coat that murders its own daughter. I seriously can't breathe, and I must be overthinking it. That there's no way this clueless guy and that struggling man from my dream are the same person. Just as the two were sharing a tender moment, a maid rushed in, pale with fear. Bad news, Your Majesty, Physibia Shili has attempted suicide. The moment she heard the name, the little princess froze. Isn't that my mom? The system popped up to explain, yes, that's your mother. During the 3 years you were asleep, she attempted suicide over 300 times. Of course, it was only thanks to this system stepping in every time that she didn't actually die. That hit the princess hard. So the reason I owe you so much money is because you kept saving my mom? After learning about her mother's suicide attempts, the princess couldn't calm down for a long while. She asked anxiously, but why would mother try to kill herself? Looking at the man before her, the princess felt it for the first time. Her father was a total jerk. Even if he was a king with many consorts, that woman was still her mother. Yet the king brushed her off with just a few careless words. After hearing that response, the princess grew even more disappointed. So what you're saying is, you never even went to see her once during those 3 years. What a jerk. The scene shifted as the king brought the princess to Shili Phizibia's chambers. When Chili saw the breathtaking woman before her, she couldn't help but think, is this really my mother? She's so beautiful. Come to think of it, I can't remember anything about my past life. I wonder if my mother back then was just as beautiful. Seeing her mother rush toward her, Chili clenched her little hands, nervous yet full of anticipation. But the king suddenly lifted the princess high over his head. For a moment, even the princess had no idea what was going on. The king immediately kicked Chili aside and asked anxiously, baby, are you okay? I'm fine. Seeing that the little princess was unharmed, the king leaned in and gave her another affectionate kiss. As long as my baby's okay, Chili shoved him away with disdain. Then keep that to yourself. Just call me baby. That's enough. At that moment, the system popped up again. Congratulations, host. Favorability plus 80. You've earned 800 gold coins. Keep it up. But honestly, earning 800 or 1,000 at a time is way too slow. When are you ever going to pay back what you owe me? Hearing the system mock her again, Chili threw a punch without hesitation. Watching these two clowns act all lovey-dovey, Chili's expression darkened visibly. She sat down on the floor in a seemingly pitiful pose, tears sliding down her cheeks. That was when the little princess finally noticed her mother, looking at the graceful woman before her. The princess instantly melted as she's so beautiful. I really want her to hug me. Chili's tears fell before she even realized it. From backstage, the little hamster watched quietly. Looks like my host truly longs for a mother. After all, in both her past life and this one, she had never really had a mother. Under the princess's persistent insistence, the king had no choice but to set her down. She toddled toward her mother like a baby learning to walk. Then something utterly dramatic happened. Physibia Chili suddenly shoved the little princess away. In a flash, she threw herself into the king's arms. So that pitiful, fragile act earlier. Completely fake. At that moment, the little princess completely broke down, pushed away by her own mother, tears pouring freely. At that moment, the little hamster popped out to comfort her. I told you. If you want that woman to hug you, it'll cost 5,000 gold coins. After getting burned so many times, the little princess had finally grown smarter and saw right through it. Why? I just want a mom's hug. Why do I have to pay for that? Hearing this, the hamster was startled. Oh no. This kid has grown up. She's sharp now, not so easy to fool anymore. Then the princess paused and thought to herself, what's wrong with me? I'm a transmigrator, aren't I? That woman is at best the original body's mother, not mine. Even if she doesn't like me, why should I be sad? Seeing the princess cry, the king shoved Physibia aside without hesitation. With a stern face, he barked, go hug her or I'll have you executed. Though deeply unwilling, Physibia had no choice but to comply when she saw the king's dark expression. She opened her arms toward Chili with forced sincerity, yet hesitation still lingered in her eyes. After all, she'd heard the child's magic talent was terrifying and dangerously unstable. What if she froze her on the spot? But her worries proved unnecessary. The little princess wasn't just gifted with magic. Her intelligence was top tier as well. As Physibia slowly approached, Chili pushed her away without hesitation. Sorry, I'm allergic to green tea-scented perfume. Please don't come any closer. Physibia was completely baffled by the reaction. All she could do was look toward the king in helpless appeal. Watching these two pairs of clowns, the king finally burst out laughing. Sigh, this king is really an idiot. Putting on a serious face, the king declared, since Physibia Chili no longer shows suicidal tendencies, I'll be taking Chili back with me. Just as they were about to leave, Physibia stopped them. I've missed my daughter for 3 years. Can't she stay with me a little longer? But the king seemed to have expected this and asked the little princess instead. So, my precious baby, do you want to stay and keep her company? After receiving a clear no, the king looked so pleased he might as well have wagged his tail. Even the little princess was speechless. Later, the hamster asked in confusion, host, didn't you always want a mom's hug? Why did you suddenly turn it down? With her sky-high IQ, the princess flipped the tables instantly. Give me 3,000 gold coins and I'll tell you why. Seeing her crafty expression, the hamster almost spat out blood. As they were leaving, the little princess rested her hands on her father's shoulders. Yes, I do want a mother's hug. Very much so. That I don't even know why I crave it this badly. But even so, I can't accept a fake, emotionless embrace. If she doesn't truly love me, I'd rather pretend I never had a mother. Listening to her thoughts, the hamster tugged at a strand of her hair, thinking, this kid's stubbornness is giving me a headache. Then it looked at the princess with sympathy. The more you want something, the more you care, to the point where you can't tolerate even the slightest flaw. At that moment, the hamster wasn't just a shady merchant who scammed her gold. It felt more like a kind elder. The system then pulled out something that looked like a chocolate bar from nowhere and tossed it at Physibia. That woman was never fit to be a mother anyway. Since my host doesn't want you, you're done. In the magnificent palace, the little princess lay on a soft bed, drifting in and out of sleep. Sitting beside her, the king gently wiped away the tears at the corner of her eyes with clumsy yet careful fingers. He then ordered the maid coldly, go tell Physibia Chili to stop using suicide as a trick to lure me to her. If there's a next time, I'll send her down to join her previous child. Stroking the princess's chubby little cheek, the daughter-obsessed king swore solemnly. Don't worry, my precious baby. If you don't like that woman, I'll find the gentlest woman in the world to be your mother. Other princesses have mothers who love them, you must have one too. At that moment the little princess grabbed her father's fist tightly and murmured, half asleep, "Dad." Hearing that word, the king was instantly overwhelmed. It was the first time any child had ever called him that. Dad sounded far sweeter than Father King. Drunk on excitement, the king lunged forward and pounced onto Chili. The sudden movement startled the drowsy princess, and she instinctively reached out and scratched him. The king stared straight at the little princess. The hamster felt a chill. This is bad. The host's in trouble. 3 years ago, the princess had accidentally scratched the king's handsome face, which caused widespread dissatisfaction throughout the court. Some even petitioned for her execution. Back in the present, to everyone's shock, the princess no longer looked innocent or meek. With an arrogant expression she snorted, "Execute me. Do they even deserve that?" Seeing this abnormal behavior, the hamster nearly rolled its eyes back. Oh no. Did Chili go berserk again and release her second personality? As the princess scratched his face again, the king's hands began to tremble uncontrollably. Yet the little princess said smugly, "What? You old geezer, I scratched you. Got a problem with that?" The king looked awkwardly at his own handsome face, pointing at it in disbelief. He couldn't believe that the once adorable little princess had actually called him an old geezer. Am I really that old already? After receiving a firm confirmation, the king spat out a mouthful of blood on the spot. That hurt, bro. This entire scene was clearly witnessed by the queen hiding outside the door. She had already devised a plan to make sure the little princess would die without a burial. With a vicious smile, she thought last time the girl was still in hibernation. Scratching the king could be overlooked. But now she's already 3 years old and still so disrespectful. Hey, no one's letting her off this time. Clenching her tiny fists, the queen muttered word by word, "I'll make sure she dies horribly." Back with the little princess. If those words had come from a son, he wouldn't have lived to see tomorrow. But unfortunately, it was the king's most beloved daughter who said them. The king immediately pulled the princess into his arms, sounding aggrieved. "My precious baby," saying things like "that really hurts daddy's heart." As he spoke, he gently patted her adorable little bun hairstyle. "But daddy's really sad. You're only 3 and I'm already an old man to you. I'm worried I'll die of old age before you even grow up." Sigh. This king is truly hopeless. Listening to the silly king's speech, even the hamster was moved to manly tears. If even that touching speech can't move you, then don't blame the system for being ruthless. With that, it pulled out an inflatable hammer and swung it at the little princess. Seeing the princess collapse into his arms once again, the king panicked and began shouting frantically for the royal physician. Early the next morning, the little princess lay peacefully on her soft bed. The hamster was utterly confused. Why isn't she awake yet? Did I hit her too hard yesterday? But she's way too strong. If I didn't hit hard enough, I couldn't suppress her at all. At that moment, the vicious Physibia appeared at the doorway with her little lackey in tow. The moment she stepped inside, she sneered, "Princess Chili, aren't you being far too rebellious? Even if His Majesty favors you, you injured the royal body, forget the ministers. None of yous will let this slide." Seeing her mistress act so dominant, the lackey somehow found the courage to step forward, intending to discipline the princess. As if the princess would tolerate that, she raised her hand and slapped her across the face. Smack. 2 sharp slaps just to make sure she remembered the lesson. Watching her follower get slapped, Physibia could no longer stay calm. Unfortunately for her, she was greeted with another solid slap. Just as Physibia tried to protest, yet another slap landed squarely on her face. Well now, after all that, the symmetry was finally perfect. Turns out the princess had been awake all along. She was just waiting for the perfect moment to show off, and she nailed the landing. Facing Physibia's accusations, the princess replied with utter disdain, "Yeah, maybe it was a bit too much. So what?" Fear surged through Physibia's heart. "Damn it, I forgot this little brat has magic. I can't beat her. Fine, at least I'll force her to apologize. Then I'll report her to His Majesty. You're dead, you little monster." But the princess seemed able to hear their thoughts. Once she realized their biggest backing was the king, she only became more arrogant. "Hey, you can't beat me anyway. Apologize. That'll never happen in this lifetime. If you know what's good for you, leave right now. Otherwise, I don't mind adding a few more perfectly symmetrical handprints to your pancake faces." Seeing the princess like this, the system could only cry rivers of tears. "We're doomed. I hit her so hard yesterday and still couldn't knock out her second personality. What am I supposed to do now?" Before the words had even settled, Physibia Shili stepped into the room. She spoke as if she were pleading on behalf of the vicious Physibia. Yet the moment she saw the slap marks on Physibia's face, she couldn't help but laugh. "Chili, if you hurt them like this, how are they supposed to go out and face people? These injuries will take at least 10 days, maybe half a month to heal. Hearing Shili's words, the vicious Physibia and her lackey both turned pale with fear. The lackey whispered nervously, "What do we do now? There's a banquet in half a month. How are we supposed to show our faces like this?" Meanwhile, the princess, now fully under her second personality's control, stepped on the system without hesitation. Wearing a smug grin, she said, "Then why did you come to hit me in the first place? Look at you now, you can't even attend a banquet." Those words made Physibia spit out a mouthful of blood on the spot. At that moment, Shili stepped forward, playing the role of peacemaker. Physibia, standing nearby, was even more confused by the situation. Why is this woman suddenly being kind? Asking her daughter to apologize. We've bullied her plenty before, she's not here to mock us. Even Shili herself hadn't expected the princess to be this domineering, completely ignoring her mother's words. With a thud, she dropped to her knees, covering her face as she burst into tears. The sight made veins stand out on the princess's forehead. She was clearly furious now. "Are you sure the one hurting them is me? And not the mother who didn't bother with the facts and immediately forced her own daughter to apologize?" At that moment, the king stormed in from the doorway, furious. He roared, "My daughter can hit whoever she wants and refuse to apologize if she wants. Who do you think you are, ordering my child around?" The surrounding Physibias didn't even dare breathe, terrified that one wrong word would get them dragged out and executed. The little princess turned toward her father. Yet at the same time, her soul energy was rapidly draining away. The hamster's heart sank that it knew this was its final chance. Without hesitation, it pulled out the inflatable hammer and slammed it down on the princess's head. Unfortunately, it did absolutely nothing. Cold sweat instantly soaked the hamster. "This hit's free. Just please come back already." Still no response. By now, the hamster was completely panicking. Tears streamed down its face. "Fine, forget it. I'm all in. If you come back, I'll wipe out all the gold you owe the system. Completely." Turns out money really does work in critical moments. The instant the system finished speaking, the princess stabilized. You'd never imagine how far a father would go for his daughter. Regaining herself, the little princess dove straight into her father's arms. With an innocent look, she said, "Father, I don't want to apologize. And I don't want to hear lectures about how hitting people is wrong." Holding the adorable princess, the king seemed completely defeated, in the best way possible. Just as the princess had predicted, the scales of victory were already tipping in her favor. Hearing the king's words, the vicious Physibia even began to doubt herself. Was I really the one who deserved to be hit? At that moment, the system reappeared. But thinking about all the gold it had painstakingly saved, now completely wiped out, it couldn't help but burst into tearful hamster sobs. The king then spoke to the little princess with deep sincerity. "I worked my way to this throne for one reason alone. So that one day I could spoil whoever I want. And the one I spoil can do whatever she wants. The person I've spent my entire life pampering and indulging is you." Hearing this, I honestly suspected for a moment that the king was confessing his love to the princess. But remembering that he was a once-in-a-millennium daughter-obsessed father, it suddenly didn't seem strange at all. Meanwhile, the Physibias standing nearby were each calculating their own schemes. One had come under the queen's pressure, intending to assassinate the princess. Another hoped to win more of the king's favor, but the king didn't spare them a glance. Watching this farce unfold, the queen lurking outside the door turned deathly pale with rage. In truth, Physibia Hilly's fate had always been tragic. Before the princess was even born, she had already given the king a son. But what does an infant know of human malice? The poisoned wine meant for Hilly was mistakenly consumed by her child instead. Watching her newborn collapse before her eyes, Hilly could only scream in despair. Yet a king whose creed was daughter above all else never bothered with such matters. And so the incident was quietly buried. With a grim expression, the queen ordered her subordinates inform all ministers. Princess Chili has grown arrogant from favor and has repeatedly injured His Majesty's sacred body. Physibia Hilly, and your daughter. Neither of you will be allowed to live another second in this world. Back at the palace, the little princess changed into a beautiful ceremonial dress. She then performed a graceful, elegant gesture, thanking her father for protecting her just now. Watching from the side, the hamster sighed, "Now this is my host, cute and polite too." Seeing this, the king couldn't help but shed a tear of emotion. My Chili actually learned to say thank you to me. Still, he hadn't come to see her without reason. He took the roster of candidates handed over by a servant. Inside were countless Physibias. This time, the king wanted the princess to choose one she liked to become her mother. Watching how serious he looked, The little princess couldn't help wondering when she'd gotten so close to this airhead that he even needed her approval to pick a woman. Yet the moment she saw the portraits inside the album, her heart still fluttered. All the Physibias in here were so beautiful. The king stepped behind her, gently rubbing her cute hair buns with his large hand, and asked Eggy, "Just tell father which one you like. I'll make her your mother." The princess froze. So this thick album wasn't for himself at all. It was for me. In the end, however, she closed the album. Seeing this, the hamster lurking backstage immediately rushed out, trying to stop what it considered a disastrously stupid decision. The pink-haired woman in that album is really important. To be fair, the hamster actually did something right this time. Staring at that fair-skinned beauty, a giant question mark appeared above the princess's head. Who exactly was she? Why did she look so familiar? Just then, a minister suddenly rushed out of the crowd, shouting, "Your Majesty, please execute Princess Chili." It turned out the vicious queen hadn't been idle during this time either. Determined to crush the princess in the cradle, she had mobilized the entire royal court. And the civil and military officials gathered here were the sharpest evidence she had prepared. As the overlapping voices of debate echoed through the hall, the little princess shed tears of grievance for the first time. She couldn't understand how things had come to this. She had done nothing wrong. Just as she broke down crying, the king appeared behind her, pulling her tightly into his arms. "Don't be afraid, my precious Eggy. Your father will never let these fools hurt you." It was the first time the princess had ever felt such solid security from that goofy king. After calming her down, the king shed his usual honest, harmless demeanor. In that moment he looked almost like a demon incarnate. "I have never enjoyed slaughter," he said coldly. "That's why I've allowed you to shout here freely. I'm almost moved by my own mercy. Yet you're still not satisfied?" The ministers immediately fell silent, scarcely daring to breathe. They couldn't believe His Majesty had truly considered killing them. The young minister standing at the front nearly lost his soul. After all, these people were brought here by him. Refusing to accept reality, he wiped the cold sweat from his forehead and tried to reassure himself. "No, the king never kills recklessly. He's just trying to scare us." No one knew where he found the courage, but under such oppressive tension, he still stepped forward to accuse the princess of countless crimes. He even declared that if Princess Chili were not executed, they would prove their resolve with their own lives. Several senior ministers at the front could no longer bear it and hurriedly tried to stop him. Seeing this, the king said nothing more and simply turned his head, looking toward the princess sobbing in the corner, memories of her flashing through his mind. He had once believed the princess was a strong-willed child, but seeing her like this he suddenly realized she was only 3 years old, fragile and helpless, with her father as her sole refuge. He then walked over to the little princess and lifted her into his arms. "Dragons have reverse scales. Touch them and you die." He spoke coldly to everyone in the hall. "Whoever dares to set their sights on Chili again, I will gladly fulfill their wish to die for their so-called conviction." Seeing this, the ministers finally understood. This was the king's absolute bottom line. One by one, they knelt respectfully and thanked His Majesty for sparing their lives. Held in the king's arms, the princess froze. Was he standing against every minister here just for me? At that moment, a slender little hand reached out. It gently held her chubby hand. It was Prince Shichi. Meeting Shichi's sincere, hopeful gaze, 3 huge question marks popped up over the princess's head. Who was he again? Watching from backstage, the hamster system cried out in disbelief. "Seriously, he's taken care of you for years and you don't remember him?" It was almost funny. When Shichi realized the princess didn't recognize him, he nearly lost his breath on the spot. Even so, the young minister who had led the charge was still recklessly testing the edge between life and death. After the princess was handed over to Prince Shichi, the rest needs no explanation. Without some bloodshed, his suicidal bravado would have gone unpunished. You'd never believe it. A noble princess of the empire had once been bullied by a mere chicken, and because of the king's decision she was secretly sent to a certain place in a neighboring kingdom. Witnessing this, Prince Shichi couldn't help but curse under his breath. Jokes are jokes, but don't mess around with flying people. Upon returning to the palace, Shichi let out a long sigh. He then ordered his men to recruit immediately and search the entire country for a girl. The scene shifted and the little princess lay in total disarray inside a chicken coop. Rubbing her big Kazilon-style eyes, she could hardly believe there were so many chickens here. Unfortunately, these chickens clearly had attitudes. To such an unexpected intruder, the princess's fate was painfully obvious. Just as she turned to flee for her life, a small hand suddenly reached out from a pile of straw, yanking the princess straight inside. Before her stood a fair-skinned, beautiful young girl. The princess was about to speak when the girl raised a hand to stop her. Only after the chickens had completely run off did the two cautiously crawl out from the straw pile. Seeing how utterly miserable they both looked, they couldn't help bursting into laughter. After laughing it off, the girl asked curiously, "So, who are you? Why did you suddenly fall from the sky just now?" The princess replied innocently, "If I say my dad accidentally dropped me, would you believe it? That excuse honestly wouldn't fool even an idiot." The girl could only pretend to stay calm, thinking to herself, "This kid is really terrible at lying." Then it was the princess's turn to ask, "What about you? You're dressed so beautifully like a real princess. Why were you hiding in a straw pile?" The girl could only reply awkwardly, If I say I messed up a spell and accidentally ended up here, would you believe me? Seriously, too many idiots aren't scary, but when idiots gather together, trust disappears completely." Just then, a well-dressed young lady stepped out from the side. Apparently, she mistook the princess and the girl for slaves her father had just bought. She demanded that both of them kneel and bow to her. That said, calling her a young lady was a bit generous, judging by her looks. Even the princess found it hard to look straight at her. Noticing what she thought was mockery about her weight, the girl swung her hand at the princess. The princess simply sidestepped. The girl immediately fell flat on her face. Both of them stared in shock. Was she an idiot or what? The girl snapped back to her senses and glared viciously at them. "You filthy slave dogs. I'll cut off your heads. One to feed the dogs, the other to kick around like a ball." At this point, no one could tolerate it anymore. Before the spoiled rich girl could finish her rant, the other girl kicked her hard. The princess followed suit and kicked her as well. Afterward, the two fell silent for a second. Then they burst out laughing together. Just then, a hand landed on the princess's shoulder. It turned out the farm owner's servants had arrived. To be honest, the two of them looked ridiculously guilty together. As expected, the ending was simple. They were tied up tightly like dumplings. Seated high upon the throne, the girl casually swirled her wine glass. With an arrogant grin, she said, "Kneel and bow your heads. Maybe I'll leave you with an intact corpse." Seriously, this was like plucking hair from a tiger's back. Pure suicide. Before she could finish her sentence, the girl broke free of her restraints. She stepped hard on the spoiled rich girl, pinning her to the ground. "I am a princess. Why should I kneel to you?" Watching her, the little princess couldn't help but think, "She's so cool." As expected, the rich girl still refused to accept reality and struggled to her feet. "You filthy trash. I'm the only princess of this farm," she screamed. One of the maids hurriedly reached out to stop things, thinking caution was best. What she got instead was a sharp slap across the face. Seeing this, the little princess could no longer stay still. She used magic to tear the ropes apart, and a powerful aura of freezing magic began to swirl around her. At that moment, the princess's third persona fully awakened. Even the girl who had shared hardship with her stood in awe of the overwhelming royal presence. The most terrified one was the little hamster. "This is bad. The third persona is out and it's far more violent than the last one." The hamster desperately tried shouting to snap her out of it. The princess didn't even spare him a glance, she simply pointed a finger. In the next instant, the hamster turned into an ice sculpture. From that moment on, no one could stand in the princess's way. Facing the maid who came looking for trouble, the little princess said nothing. As an overwhelming surge of freezing magic wrapped around her hand, the maid was effortlessly lifted high above her head. Then, amid the maid's terrified scream, she was slammed brutally to the ground. Seeing this, the blonde girl could no longer stay back and rushed forward, trying to reason with the princess. The princess merely reached out, scratching the girl's golden hair, and sneered, "Violence, brutality. Missy, are you getting old? Is your brain not working anymore?" she said, grabbing the girl by the collar. "They wanted to kill us just now, so if I kill them instead, what's wrong with that?" The girl was left momentarily speechless by the princess's aggressive words. After struggling internally, she finally said, "What you're doing is wrong." But in the middle of their argument, danger was already creeping in. At the critical moment, the girl chose to shove the princess away, shouldering the danger alone. Seeing her former companion fall before her eyes, the princess completely lost control. At the same time, an ice-forged sword materialized in front of her. Just as the princess was about to unleash a massacre, the king rushed onto the scene. But fully overtaken by her third persona, the princess gripped the icy blade tightly with both hands. She roared, "Where did this rotten old man come from? Mind your own business. Anyone who gets in my way deserves to die." The moment she finished speaking, the bloodthirsty princess charged, thrusting the sword straight at the king. The little hamster was completely stunned. Give this girl a bit of magic and she could wipe out the whole world. This persona is way too dangerous. What kind of artifact could possibly wake her up? At that moment, the blade had already pierced deep into the king's chest. Prince Shichi, who arrived a split second too late, grabbed the sharp sword with his bare hands. He shouted in panic, "Chili, wake up! That's your father, your king." In the critical instant, the little hamster pulled out something that looked like a bandage and slapped it onto the princess's forehead. With that, the chaos finally came to a halt. The princess collapsed, utterly drained, into her father's arms. Seeing this, Shichi asked softly, "Uncle Colin, aren't you angry after what Chili did to you?" The king replied calmly, "That's a strange question, kid. How could I ever be angry with my precious girl? She must have been too emotional because I arrived too late to save her. Otherwise, my little one would never have the heart to hurt her own father." Hearing that answer, I wasn't surprised at all. After all, he's a once-in-a-millennium doting father. The scene shifted back to the 21st century. A girl who looked just like the princess was crouched in a corner, full of grievance. Standing in front of her was a group of delinquent boys, sneering and threatening to treat her to some frogs. Faced with such bullying, the girl could only endure it in silence. Unwilling tears streamed down her cheeks. After it was over, someone even spat out cruel words. "With that trash-collecting dad of yours, you think he can help? Even if he shows up, we'll beat him too." The girl slumped against the wall, her body covered in wounds. Just then, a ragged middle-aged man ran toward her like a madman. He kept calling out the girl's name over and over again. Seeing his daughter unconscious, the man's heart felt like it was bleeding as he desperately asked, "Who did this? Who hurt you? Daddy will get revenge." Yet the little princess struggled to raise her tiny hand and pushed the man away. Tears burst from her eyes as she cried out, "Go away, I don't need you anymore. Where were you when I was being beaten? If you weren't there when they hit me, then I don't need you now either. Just go." Even so, she finally broke down and burst into tears in the man's arms. The man could only say helplessly, "Lily, Daddy is trying to earn money. I didn't mean it." The scene shifted back to the royal palace of Kongwei Ganabo. Watching the unconscious princess lying on the bed, the king wiped his tears with a handkerchief. His only wish now was for her to wake up soon. Lake placed a hand on the king's shoulder and comforted him. All right, stop crying. The doctor said it's nothing serious, she'll wake up soon." But the king trembled as he pulled out his pocket watch. "How long is soon? It's already been 5 minutes and 49 milliseconds. Why isn't Chili awake yet?" With that, the king collapsed beside the bed and sobbed uncontrollably. Seeing this, the prince sucked in a breath and subconsciously scratched his handsome little face. Why does Uncle Colin suddenly feel like a child? One who's being comforted by my father instead. At that moment, the little princess suddenly woke up. She shouted, "You two old, ugly adulterers. Keep it down, you're disturbing this princess. You deserve to be killed." Wow. Even the princess thinks these two are true love. That single sentence left both men completely stunned. "You want to kill us? I'm your father." Just then, the princess abruptly returned to her original personality. The moment she woke up, she angrily started looking for the pig-faced girl who had beaten her earlier. After all, the princess is notoriously vengeful, even declaring, "That fat woman hit me once. I'll hit her back once." One day, Prince Shichi looked at the little princess and couldn't help sighing. In just this short time, it feels like she's become 3 different people. Just then, the queen, dressed in a coffee-colored gown, entered the room. The moment he saw her, Sisi rushed straight into his mother's arms. Stroking her son's handsome face, the queen sighed, 3 years apart. You've grown so much, Sisi." Lake then stepped over to stand beside the queen. Watching this warm family scene, tears quietly streamed down the little princess's face. After all, she had never experienced the warmth of a complete family. Wiping away her tears, the princess clenched her tiny fists and shouted angrily, I don't mind your family of 4 being all loving and cozy. But could you at least move away and stop blocking my sunlight?" The next second, a powerful wave of ice magic swirled around her that if you don't back off, I'm going to attack. But to her surprise, Fina wasn't afraid of her magic at all. She even grabbed the princess's small hand and said with a grin, "If we're in your way, then join us. Why stand there pretending to look cool?" Caught completely off guard, the princess didn't know how to react. Then the queen suddenly lifted her up from behind. "What an adorable little girl. No wonder Shichi and Fina both like you." Just as the princess was about to struggle, the queen started mercilessly pinching her chubby cheeks. And in that accidental moment, the princess experienced for the first time what maternal love truly felt like. Seeing this, the king showed a long-lost smile. He then turned to Lake and said, "Seriously, Lake, you see it, right? My Chili really likes your queen." At this moment, Lake failed to realize how serious the situation was and instead said with relief, "Yes. She really is an adorable little girl. In that case, the king replied smoothly, Lake, give your queen to me. Honestly, this king truly dared to say anything. The moment Lake heard that, he froze on the spot. What did you say? I didn't quite hear you just now. I said, give your queen to me. The king even leaned closer. Hey, I'm talking to you. Why aren't you saying anything? If you don't respond, I'll take that as a yes.my precious little one finally gets a mother. No. At the dining table, Shichi and Fina kept piling food onto the little princess's plate. Faced with such overwhelming kindness, tears immediately welled up in the princess's eyes. Thank you. If only I'd met you sooner. As soon as she finished speaking, her eyelids drooped and she fell asleep. The scene shifted. The princess lay peacefully on a soft bed. After examining her, the doctor reassured everyone, there's no need to worry. Princess Chili is simply asleep. Hearing this, Fina couldn't help but remark, she can even fall asleep just from eating properly. The queen gently stroked Fina's forehead and explained, Chili is just exhausted. Watching the warm interaction between mother and daughter, the king thought to himself, what a tender pair. Why couldn't my little one meet a mother like this? As the thought struck him, tears slid down his cheeks. Just then, a guard burst in, pale with fear. Your Majesty, bad news. Fisbia Hilly has attempted suicide again. By now, the king wasn't even surprised. After all, Fisbia Hilly had already tried to kill herself over 300 times. He let out a long sigh. What was the reason this time? The guard leaned in and whispered the details. After hearing it all, the king felt as if he'd been struck by lightning. The guard urged the king to return to the palace at once. But as he looked at the sleeping princess, the king hesitated. Seeing this, Lake couldn't help but sigh. The man who used to be reckless had clearly become much more composed. Most likely it was all because of this child. Lake then assured him, go take care of it. Chili will stay with me, don't worry. The king understood immediately and patted his shoulder. Lake, you truly are my good brother. Still, if you were willing to give me your queen as well, that would be even better. The moment he heard that, Lake's whole body trembled and he clenched his fist and threw a punch straight at the king. Today was the day Fisbia Sophie entered the palace. The queens and other Fisbias, having received the news, gathered early in the hall. Though the atmosphere looked peaceful on the surface, Sophie knew things wouldn't go smoothly. Under everyone's gaze, Sophie gracefully bowed. Fisbia Sophie greets all the elder sisters. The queen was just about to speak, when Hilly cut in sharply. Oh, my Fisbia Sophie, why are you calling us elder sisters? Are you implying we're old and fading? The once harmonious scene shattered instantly as accusations flew. Sophie's expression darkened as if water might drip from her face. Yet she had already decided how she would deal with Hilly. Putting on a gentle smile, she said then, greetings, younger sisters. That did nothing to calm the situation. To the others, it sounded like blatant provocation. A newcomer dares to act like our senior. They snarled, moving to drag Sophie out and beat her to death. But Sophie was no pushover. She broke free from the guard's grip in one swift move, then rushed forward and slapped Hilly across the face. Everyone froze in shock. No one had expected Sophie to be this aggressive. Sophie then rubbed her slender hand, putting on a pitiful expression. Ah, why is your face so tough? My hand hurts from hitting you. The scene shifted back to the little princess. As she lay on the bed, sleeping like a lump, the little hamster pointed with a finger, and the princess's soul was instantly transported to the royal palace. Just as the princess was wondering who the girl behind her was, Sophie walked straight through her body. The princess panicked at once, touching her chubby cheeks. So, am I dead? Yet when she saw Sophie slap Hilly in the face, the princess stared in disbelief. Who is this girl? She actually dared to hit father's Fisbia? Then Sophie suddenly plopped down on the floor and burst into tears. What did I do wrong? Sister, why are you being so mean? Everyone could only stare at one another in stunned silence. Seated calmly upon the throne, the queen simply watched the farce unfold. At that, Hilly shot upright. You call me mean? You're the one who hit me. But Sophie put on an innocent face. You hit me so hard that my hand hurts too. Let's call it even. Seriously, this logic was unbelievable. Even the little princess stared in shock. You can say things like that? Having just entered the palace, Fisbia Sophie had already given Hilly a crushing warning. Hilly's face flushed red, clearly furious at Sophie's shameless tactic. She raised her hand about to strike Sophie, but Sophie wasn't defenseless either. Right in front of everyone, she wrapped herself around the queen's leg, looking pitiful as she begged the queen to stand up for her. Watching Sophie take control of the situation, Hilly could only glare helplessly. Yet she sneered inwardly, that vicious queen has a heart narrower than a needle. Why would she help you? She'll probably order your execution next. What Hilly failed to realize was the true power of sweet talk. The next moment, Sophie threw herself straight into the queen's arms. The two locked eyes almost tenderly. "Dear queen," Sophie said softly, "I know you're both beautiful and kind." The queen didn't seem impressed. With her eyes gently closed, she replied teasingly, "No one's ever praised me like that before, that I'm almost flattered. But let go. Even if you flatter me like this, I still won't." Before she could finish, Hilly was already wearing a confident smile. She could practically see Sophie's fate. Of all people, she chose this small-minded woman to seek justice from. The queen would love nothing more than to watch the concubines destroy each other until she stood alone. The other Thisbias held their breath, watching in silence as they awaited the queen's decision. Sophie then sat up from the queen's embrace, pressing both hands to her chest. With a pitiful look, she said, "I know, Her Majesty couldn't bear to order her execution. But kind queen, you are the ruler of the harem, that if you remain this merciful, then today it's just a minor Thisbia daring to kill another before you. Tomorrow won't anyone feel free to kill at will, no longer taking you seriously?" After saying this, she dropped to her knees with a sharp thud in front of the queen. That single remark darkened the queen's expression instantly, as if water could drip from it. She said coldly, "Oh, so this is how you all see me, someone easy to bully." The pressure in the room surged. Hilly sensed disaster and collapsed to her knees at once. One after another, the other Thisbias followed suit, kneeling down. None of them had expected that merely standing aside to watch would drag them into this. The once arrogant Thisbia Hilly could now only beg on her knees, "Our loyalty to you is witnessed by the sun and the moon." Seeing this, even the little princess scratched her head in disbelief. Was it really that easy to turn the tables? Backstage, the little hamster saw the drama settle down and immediately turned to shower affection on its online sweetheart. Incredible. These days even hamsters are dating. Once the farce ended, Sophie looked smugly at the unfortunate Thisbia. "Sister Hilly, what's wrong? The queen only ordered 3 days of reflection. That's already very merciful. Surely you're not dissatisfied with the queen's judgment?" It had to be said, this newly arrived Thisbia was frighteningly sharp. Even the usually untouchable queen had been led by the nose. The queen also stepped in and said calmly, "If you're dissatisfied, then make it a month of reflection." At that moment, Hilly finally understood what true despair felt like. As she left, Sophie couldn't resist mocking her. After all, breaking someone mentally is far more entertaining than killing them. She was certain that concubine Hilly had learned that lesson well. Watching Sophie's retreating figure, Hilly silently swore to herself, "Don't think I don't know who you are. Don't think I don't know why you deliberately entered the palace. You've offended me, so I'll make sure you suffer even more than I do." To be fair, Hilly was incredibly efficient. Soon enough, a noose was already hanging in her room. Meanwhile, she sat calmly at her vanity, carefully putting on her makeup. She then asked a maid, "Has the message been spread?" "Yes," the maid replied, "His Majesty should find out very soon." With everything in place, all that remained was the final push. A faint smile curled at the corner of her lips. The very next second, the room erupted into a chorus of wailing screams. Hearing it from next door, Sophie couldn't help muttering a curse under her breath. Hilly was truly committed. She kept screaming for a full 3 hours straight. Listening from the next room, Sophie felt her scalp go numb, on the verge of collapse. She couldn't help complaining, "If I'd known this, I never would have let the queen arrange for me to stay next door. This is terrifying." Then suddenly she heard the voices of the king and Hilly talking. At the same time, Hilly threw herself into the king's arms, eagerly showing off Sophie's work. Moments later, Sophie pushed the door open and walked in. Strangely enough, her makeup looked even more refined. The two concubines immediately began comparing injuries, each insisting hers was worse. They even demanded that the king personally step in and judge the matter. Faced with such an unreasonable demand, the king could no longer tolerate it. He spoke up, "So, that means you're even now, isn't it?" Seeing no reaction from the two concubines, the king's expression darkened instantly. "What? Are you unwilling to reconcile?" Meanwhile, elsewhere in the palace, George stared at the pile of books stacked nearly half his height and immediately felt a headache coming on. He couldn't understand what had gotten into his mother. He'd never been forced to memorize books his entire life, and now she suddenly wanted him to do it. There was no way he could manage. In frustration, he slammed his palm down hard on the desk. Seeing this, the maid could only show a helpless smile. Recalling the terrifying scene of concubine Hilly turning into a raging tyrant, she still felt a chill run down her spine. Make George memorize it. Pick the harshest insults. Next time something like that happens, I want to stand up and argue with her, and win. The maid could only sigh and say, "In short, since Consort Zabia told you to study more, you'd better just memorize more." Just then, a massive fireball suddenly appeared above George's head. In an instant, the entire desk was set ablaze. The maid screamed immediately, "Someone, put out the fire." At the same time, Shichi appeared in the room with the little princess. Seeing the scene before him, Shichi was completely stunned. Could it be that the teleportation went wrong again, causing a massive fire this time? Among everyone present, the happiest one was actually George. On the surface, he urged the maids to put out the fire, but deep down he was secretly pleased. Burn harder. The stronger, the better. The little princess grabbed George's hand and muttered softly, "Lily likes it." With her childish face and that expression, she was unbearably cute. Standing nearby, Shichi looked worried and quickly explained, "Your Highness, please don't be angry. Chili was just frightened." It was said that the princes of the kingdom of Kamaya all had terrible tempers and had never cared much about Chili. That if this prince were angered at such a moment, things could turn very bad. All Shichi could do now was pray that nothing else went wrong. But the little princess pushed Shichi away and shouted, "Lily wasn't scared. Lily likes it. Don't hate Lily." Seeing her speak up for him, a faint blush appeared on George's face. He then gave an order without hesitation, "If Sister Chili likes fire, then make it burn even brighter." Good grief. People in this palace clearly inherited more than a little of that foolish king's nature. Even Shichi couldn't help wondering if this prince wasn't quite right in the head either. And so this scene unfolded. Shichi stood behind them, completely dumbfounded, often feeling out of place simply because he wasn't goofy enough to match them. But staring at these two absolute geniuses in chaos, he suddenly realized he still had a long way to go to reach that level. Meanwhile, the king, busy outmaneuvering the harem, received news that Prince George's palace was on fire. The king didn't seem bothered at all, casually saying that if there was a fire, they should just put it out. Why report it to him? Seeing how indifferent the king looked, Sophie was utterly disappointed. His own son was practically about to burn alive, yet he showed no reaction at all. But then the maid added that Princess Chili was also trapped in the flames. That the king's heart jolted. Sophie had thought that if he didn't care about his son, surely he wouldn't care about a princess either. Yet the very next second, the king clenched his fists and sprinted toward the palace like a madman. Witnessing this, even the sharp-minded Sophie was stunned, frozen in place. He cared that much about that child? The scene shifted back to the little princess, as the maid stared at the raging fire and wondered if it might be a bit too intense. Moments later, panic-stricken, she rushed toward the princess and the prince. "It's dangerous here. We need to leave now." Yet neither of them sensed the danger approaching at all. Instead they cheered, "New Lily likes fire." And George echoed confidently, "That's right, just a fire. This prince isn't afraid." At that moment, Shichi grabbed the little princess's arm. "Chili, something's wrong. The guards and maids always spoiled the prince and played along with the fire, but it was always safe before. I don't know when it started, but we've been surrounded. Someone's trying to kill us." The next second, chunks of stone crashed down from the ceiling. Only then did everyone realize the danger had already arrived. Two maids forcibly dragged George away. On the other side, Shichi pulled the little princess and ran toward the exit. Suddenly, a falling stone dropped straight toward the little princess's head. Seeing the little princess trapped by the flames, Shichi could only scream in despair. Hidden behind the door, the queen watched calmly as the assassin beside her asked, "Your Majesty, Princess Chili is trapped in the fire now. You can rest easy, right?" A cruel smile appeared on the queen's face. "Humph, that I won't be satisfied until I see her burned to death with my own eyes." At that moment, the little princess curled up in the corner, tears bursting out instantly. With the little princess trapped in the sea of flames, at the critical moment, the king descended from the sky. At that moment, in the little princess's eyes, her father looked like a god descending from the heavens. Tears burst out instantly as she cried and ran straight toward him. That slightly childish face paired with such an expression was unbearably adorable. Seeing this, the queen hiding by the doorway felt her heart tighten. The assassin beside her asked, "Your Majesty, what should we do?" His Majesty rushed inside. But the queen calmly touched her chin with slender fingers, forcing herself to stay composed. No rush, with a fire that big, she's such a small child. Even if His Majesty goes in, he may not be able to save her. Inside the sea of flames, the king wrapped both arms tightly around the little princess, shielding her in his embrace. In the next second, the two of them charged out of the fire completely unharmed. Seeing this, the two couldn't help but spit out a mouthful of blood. At that moment, Hilly and Sophie also appeared at the doorway. Seeing the little princess safe and sound, it was only natural that the two would fight again over who she belonged to. But in the end, Sophie took the initiative. After a brief exchange, she gently rubbed the little princess's cute bun of hair with her hand. "Remember this. If you're ever bullied, no matter who it is, fight back bravely. From now on, I'll protect you. I'll be your support as long as I'm here. You won't suffer even the slightest grievance. Looking at this Visbia, the little princess felt for the first time what maternal love truly was. She then leaned closer and asked softly, "Is that really okay? Won't it offend people and bring retaliation?" Hearing that, Sophie burst out laughing. "That? No need to worry." As she spoke, she couldn't help but vigorously pinch the little princess's chubby cheeks. Just like that, the whole matter ended in laughter and joy. Night soon fell. The king sat at the bedside, fully focused on reading. As for the little princess, Sophie took her to bathe. A moment later, the king walked to the door and perked up his ears to eavesdrop. He thought to himself that woman had scolded his precious darling, yet she didn't even get angry. Soon after, Sophie came out with the little princess, whose face wore a dreamy, floating expression. Seeing this, the king gazed at the little princess with infatuation. Witnessing the scene, Sophie mistakenly thought the king had taken an interest in her. She began to show off her curvy figure, thinking, "You men, I've got you hooked now." But who would have thought? The king's expression was meant only for his little princess. Sophie was completely ignored. Still, watching the king and the little princess together in such happiness, Sophie inexplicably felt a sense of relief. The king pulled the little princess into his arms. After everything they had been through, the sight of her cute little face still made him burst into laughter. Then Keely spoke seriously, "Father, let me tell you a secret. I've seen this sister before." Hearing that, the king asked with interest, "She's entering the palace for the first time. When did you see her?" The little princess teased him, "I'm not telling. I've seen her. That's all." Seeing this, the king's expression tightened as he turned to look at the Fisbias not far away. Could it be? He had thought Keely liking her was just a coincidence, but if they had met before, then was all of this actually arranged by that woman? At that moment, the little princess suddenly started pounding her chest in the king's arms. The king's train of thought was completely interrupted because of her. The next second, the little princess jumped down from her father's arms with a look of sudden realization. Just then the system popped out to join the scene. What it received instead was a solid punch. "Trash system, how dare you show up? First I got bullied by that chubby girl, then I almost got burned to death by that fire. Where were you all that time? Were you already looking for a new host so you didn't care whether I lived or died?" Faced with this soul-piercing interrogation, the little hamster burst into tears and waved its paws frantically. "Heaven is my witness, I didn't." In the next moment, the little princess lifted the system up with one hand. She asked seriously, "There's one more thing I want to ask you. Is there something wrong with me? Or was there something wrong with the original owner of this body?" Hearing that, the little hamster was startled. Did she realize something? The little princess continued, "I can't really explain it. Sometimes I feel like I'm not myself. I don't even understand why I do certain things. But at other times I feel like I'm so cool that I really like that version of me. Yet it doesn't feel like me at all." Before the little princess could continue, the system immediately cut her off. She couldn't be allowed to keep talking. Grabbing onto the little princess, it launched into a soul-piercing rant. The little princess was completely dizzy from the sudden assault. In the blink of an eye, she saw her father chatting happily with Sophie. Watching the handsome man and beautiful woman together, the little princess's mouth twisted. A very improper idea began to sprout in her mind. The next second, right under their gazes, the little princess rolled straight toward the underside of the bed like a ball. Seeing this, the quick-reacting king scooped her up at once. "My precious one, you picked the wrong place to sleep. How could my precious sleep under the bed? Shall father tell you a story?" Standing behind them, Sophie looked utterly shocked. She hadn't expected this man who looked like a scumbag to have such a gentle side. At the same time, the little princess wriggled free from her father's arms. Covering her slightly swollen cheek, she sighed helplessly. "Is this dummy stupid or what? There's such a gorgeous woman right beside him, yet all his attention is on me. What is going on?" She turned to look at the wall, completely baffled. "Don't tell me I actually have to knock myself out by hitting the wall?" The moment the thought appeared, she hurriedly shut it down, because that was way too terrifying. Then her father scooped the little princess up. He waved his hand, signaling Sophie to leave first. This wasn't her business anymore. Hearing that, Sophie looked at the king with tears in her eyes. Even so, it didn't soften the king's cold heart in the slightest. In the end, it was only because of the little princess's strong insistence that Sophie was allowed to stay. On the soft bed, the little princess lay comfortably in the middle, while the king and Sophie faced each other at close range, both looking at the sleeping child. Sophie spoke softly. After all that trouble, she finally fell asleep. She subconsciously looked up, only to realize the king was gazing at her with deep affection. Sophie's mind instantly went into chaos. Oh no, I'm not mentally prepared. Is something actually going to happen? But her worry turned out to be unnecessary. The only thing on the king's mind was whether he should send her away now that his treasure was asleep. Next door, Hillary pressed herself against the wall, eavesdropping. Damn it, why is it so quiet? Don't tell me they've already. The thought made Hillary grind her teeth in fury. Back in the little princess's room, the two of them just stared at each other awkwardly. In the end, Sophie claimed she heard something outside, saying I'm scared, and forcibly sent the king away. Sophie immediately locked the door behind her. Oh my god, please don't come back. That was terrifying. I'm only 18, I'm not about to serve some old man. But the king hadn't gone far. Hearing her muttering, he didn't know whether to feel angry or helpless. He could only smile bitterly. After being kicked out of bed by Sophie, the king slipped his hands into his pockets and strolled leisurely through the palace corridors. When he reached a quiet corner, he suddenly spoke to the empty space. Come out. I have something to ask you. A faint shadow slowly emerged from behind the curtain. Host, are you calling this system? Wow, you haven't summoned me since Princess Keely was born. Mumu is so excited. The king froze for a moment. Seeing the system again, memories of a terrible past surfaced uncontrollably. It may sound unbelievable, but I'm not originally from this world. In theory, transmigration was pretty common where I came from. Usually, the ones chosen were handsome men or beautiful women, mostly teenagers or people in their 20s. But I suppose I was an exception. Before transmigrating, I was just a middle-aged man who made a living collecting scrap. I worked day after day until one day the hospital suddenly called me. They said my daughter had been in an accident and needed emergency treatment. What the man never expected was that, on his way to see the little princess, an accident would happen to him as well. Facing a car speeding straight toward him, the man collapsed into a pool of blood. And just like that, the king was forcibly transmigrated at the age of 45. When he woke up, he found that he had become a newborn baby. Appearing alongside him was his very own system. Host, your ultimate mission is hereby assigned. Give birth to a cute little princess and become a qualified doting father. Faced with such a ridiculous task, the king was instantly furious. He stretched out his hand ready to strike the system. After all, he was still a baby, and it wanted him to give birth to a princess. He was a man. How was that even possible? Thinking back to the mission the system had assigned him back then, it had truly terrified him. Yet now, looking at the system again, he didn't know what to say. From the very beginning until now, he had always felt that his system was unreliable. The scene shifts back to the medieval era, where the king's family was actually not well off. They lived in nothing more than an ordinary residential building. No one would have imagined that he would later truly become a king. Do you know how this clueless king began his path to the throne? At just 15 years old, he watched as his relatives fell one by one before his eyes. The murderer stood there, sword in hand, looking down at him from above. Watching the boy clutch his head and sob, the man felt no interest at all. And so, the clueless king survived, bearing everything on his shoulders. Time flew by, and 3 years passed in the blink of an eye. By then, the clueless king had grown strong enough to stand on his own. Though he was a transmigrator, in this world he had gained people he truly cared about. Now the culprit stood before him, barely clinging to life, and the clueless king raised his hand and struck with a single sword slash. From that moment on, I became the king of this country, but troubles followed soon after. That unreliable system chased me every day with a loudspeaker, telling me to have a princess, shouting it during meals, while running, even while sleeping. Why sleep? Go have a princess. Forced into it, the king ended up with 7 princes in a row. Seeing the king looking utterly drained, as if his kidneys had been emptied, the system could only smile helplessly. They're all so beautiful. Why aren't you interested? Then it asked viciously, don't tell me you actually like men? The question made the king both embarrassed and angry. He clamped a hand over the system's mouth. Don't talk nonsense. You wouldn't understand. Life went on like this for a long time, until the day the king had nearly given up, and then the little princess was born. Dragging his exhausted body, the king burst into tears. Still, Chili was truly adorable. I don't regret having her at all. Now the king's only lingering worry was how his daughter from his previous life was doing. He looked up at the system with anticipation. After all, the task it had assigned him was complete. Surely now it could tell him whether his daughter from the 21st century was alive or dead, and whether she had grown up safely. But the system was nowhere to be found. Honestly, that move put it on the same level as the hamster. Meanwhile, 2 pairs of love-hate rivals were enjoying a leisurely afternoon tea in the back garden. As she spoke, Hillary picked up a wine glass and warmly poured wine for Sophie. What happened before was my fault. Let this glass be my apology to you. Swirling the red wine, Sophie quickly thanked her. Yet recalling Hillary's wolf in sheep's clothing nature, she sneered inwardly, coming to apologize and pour wine for me. This has to be poisoned. Just then Shichi appeared in the back garden with the little princess. Oh, are you having tea? As she spoke, the little princess snatched the poisoned wine from Sophie's hand. Hillary instantly sensed trouble, jumped up from her seat and grabbed the glass back. She scolded sharply, "Chili, didn't your mother teach you? Don't eat other people's things casually." Sophie watched quietly from the side, thinking that maybe this woman still had a shred of conscience and didn't want Chili to drink that poisoned wine. But what happened next shocked everyone. The little princess grabbed the glass back once again. With a fierce yet childish glare, she retorted, "Since I was born, I can count on one hand how many times you've seen me. And you dare say you taught me?" Saying that, she pretended to bring the glass up to her lips. Seeing this, Hillary was completely stunned. But in the next second, under everyone's gaze, she hardened her heart and snapped, "You ungrateful brat. Fine, drink it if you want. Drink yourself to death for all I care, that if you die, I'll just say Sophie poisoned my precious daughter." She then lightly wiped the sweat from her forehead with her slender hand, thinking that crying a bit more in front of His Majesty later, and personally bearing him another daughter, wouldn't be difficult at all. At that moment, Sophie, who had been holding back all this time, took the wine glass in one swift motion. Then she gently poked the little princess's adorable bun. "Chili, this is wine, not tea. Children aren't allowed to drink alcohol." After Sophie's reminder, the little princess realized there was no point in pretending anymore. She snatched the glass back once again, but this time not to drink it herself. She turned and handed it to Hillary instead. Incredible! The poisoned wine prepared for Sophie had come full circle and returned to Hillary's own hands. No one knew what Hillary was feeling at that moment. Faced with the princess's steady pressure, she fell silent for a brief instant. She lowered her head, glanced at the glass, and the next second slapped the little princess across the face. The wine glass slipped from her hand and fell to the ground. The little princess was bullied by the vicious Fizbia, while the king stood aside in silence, calmly watching it all. What was really going on? It turned out that a day earlier, the king had received a temporary task from the system. To prevent other hosts from completing their missions too quickly, he was forbidden from standing up for anyone for 1 month. Awakened by the sound of gongs and drums, the king covered his head with one hand. "I'm such a lazy person," he thought. "When have you ever seen me stand up for anyone, except my precious little one?" At that thought, the king's expression hardened and he leapt out of bed. Like a madman, he grabbed the system by the head and shouted, "What do you mean by other hosts? Are there other transmigrators in this world?" At this, the system could only respond helplessly, saying it didn't know either. It didn't even understand what this task was meant to do. "But you must complete it, host. Otherwise, your daughter from the 21st century. Hearing this, the king released his grip and replied heavily, "I know." That was how the opening scene came to be. Once everything was exposed, Hillary shoved Sophie aside. She shouted angrily, "Get away. This is a matter between my daughters. It has nothing to do with an outsider like you." As she spoke, she raised her hand toward the little princess, having already decided to dump all the blame onto her. But the little princess was not so easy to bully, as the golden mark on her forehead slowly emerged. What followed needed no explanation. Faced with the terrifying aura radiating from the princess, Hillary staggered backward in fright, until she finally collapsed onto the ground. When it's your turn to drink, you lose control in anger. Your life is a life, but are mine and sister Sophie's lives not lives too? Seeing the princess stand up for her, Sophie, standing behind, couldn't help but show a trace of concern. This child seems a little strange, but no matter what, she's still her child. Even if she is strange, I'll love her with my life. Faced with the princess's relentless advance, Hillary's once arrogant presence completely vanished, leaving only endless fear on her face. "His Majesty hasn't favored me much these past years. Otherwise, once I give birth to another child, I'll definitely kill this brat." But she only dared to keep that thought buried deep inside. Watching the little princess stand with her arms crossed, bearing an aura like a king's descent, Hillary's body trembled uncontrollably. She shakily raised a finger and stammered, "Chili, do you know what you're doing?" The little princess replied with a disdainful gaze, "Punishing a bad person. What's wrong with that?" Hearing this, Hillary froze for a moment, then turned toward Sophie, who was standing aside watching the drama. She shouted angrily, "Sophie, you shameless bitch. Seriously. These days, even being a bystander isn't easy." She got scolded for absolutely nothing. "She's only been with you a few days, and now she's already hitting and cursing her own mother. Isn't that something you taught her?" Sophie was stunned at first, then clenched her teeth and snapped back, "Chili, Isn't she your daughter? Yes. And since I gave birth to her, even if I curse her as the most despicable creature alive, that's my right. Just as the two were locked in heated argument, the king made a domineering entrance. Covering her swollen cheek, Hilary was initially furious and humiliated. Who dares strike a royal consort inside the palace? But the moment she saw it was the king, her former arrogance vanished without a trace. All that remained on her face was sheer terror. Did His Majesty just hit me? No, that's impossible. His Majesty has never struck a consort. No one knew where she found the nerve. Under such circumstances, she still put on the act of a helpless victim. She threw herself into the king's arms, even trying to use her beauty to beg for forgiveness. But a dragon has its reverse scale. Touch it and death follows. This time, Hilary had truly kicked a steel plate. The king's face darkened as if storm clouds were gathering. Another slap followed. Do not let me see you again. Seeing that Hilary still didn't move, a terrifying surge of magic instantly gathered around the king's hand. The king issued his final warning. I told you to get out. Do you not understand? At the same time, the system hurried out to stop the host. You already took action earlier for Princess Chili. But the king was furious to the extreme and replied with disdain, so what? Violating system directives will result in punishment. Even a single penalty is extremely severe, so you cannot act again. If you act twice in succession, your life will be forfeit. After the warning, the king visibly calmed down. Fine. I won't strike her. I'll just quietly escort her out of the palace. Is that acceptable? Hearing this, the system folded its arms, deep in thought, as a terrifying idea suddenly surfaced. Faced with the king's questioning, the system turned its head and stammered, Host, something's wrong. Your precious daughter in the 21st century, her vital signs are approaching zero. The king felt as if he'd been struck by lightning and immediately spat out a mouthful of blood. In the stunned gazes of everyone present, he collapsed to the ground, clutching his chest in agony. He could not understand why his daughter from his previous life would suffer such an accident without reason. At that moment, the little princess broke free from Sophie's embrace and ran toward the king, tears welling up. Seeing her father lying motionless on the ground, she finally broke down, tears streaming down her face. Father, please wake up. Meanwhile, Hilary, who had just been the target of everyone's anger, immediately played the villain first. She falsely claimed that the king ended up like this because consort Sophie used the little princess to poison him, and that His Majesty collapsed after discovering it. Such twisted logic could only come from Hilary, and the only witness on the scene was Prince Shichi, hidden in the shadows. But who would believe a child's careless words? In that instant, the little princess was immediately at a disadvantage. Sophie pulled the princess into her arms, gritting her teeth in frustration. Damn it, she reported first. Now even the truth won't be believed. After completing a full examination of the king, the physician froze in place, his expression grave. Faced with the princess's questioning, he turned back with a gentle smile. Your Highness, His Majesty is fine. He simply needs more rest. He even patted her round little bun, but the princess wasn't foolish. She had clearly seen her father collapse in a pool of blood. How could he be fine? She tugged at the doctor's sleeve and asked again, really? At that moment, the physician faced a painful decision. After glancing at the other consorts, he answered firmly, yes, truly. However, the queen sensed something was wrong and gestured for the doctor to step outside. In a secluded corner, the queen spoke first. Tell me the truth. How is he? Will he die? Bowing solemnly, the doctor replied, in truth, His Majesty is gravely injured. Without timely treatment, his life may be in danger. Cold sweat formed on the queen's brow. Have you found the cause? Pressed by her gaze, the doctor turned pale and hurriedly said, Mercy, Your Majesty. I have not identified a clear cause. It only appears that a sudden force emerged within His Majesty's body and turned against him. Hidden in a corner of the palace, the little princess overheard every word of the queen's conversation with the doctor. The little princess rushed up to the doctor and grabbed his sleeve with both hands. She couldn't believe this was real, her voice trembling as she demanded, Is his life really in danger? Is it that serious? Disturbed by her outburst, the doctor swallowed the words he was about to say. With the king no longer protecting her, unseen dangers began to creep closer to the little princess. And among them, the most restless was the queen herself. At that moment, only manic joy remained on the queen's face. In her pursuit of the throne, she had long since lost count of the innocent lives she had sacrificed. Now just one step away from her goal, she immediately ordered the soldiers to seize the little princess. Sophie, who arrived moments later, froze at the sight. She immediately invoked the king, the strongest backing she had. She believed the authority and prestige the king had built would make the queen hesitate, But after a brief silence, the queen merely sneered. She then ordered the soldiers to arrest consort Sophie as well. As the soldiers advanced, Sophie's face drained of all color. But when she turned and saw the princess screaming desperately, she finally found the courage to stand up. She knew all too well that if she didn't act now, the little princess might truly be doomed. Raising her voice, she challenged the queen, "Are you not afraid His Majesty will hold you accountable once he awakens? Don't think I don't know what you're plotting." Saying so, she stepped up to the queen and placed a hand on her shoulder. It was the first time Sophie had ever spoken so boldly to this vicious queen. "You intend to have us executed, don't you? Even if His Majesty wakes up, you can simply shift all the blame onto consort Hilly. And I also know His Majesty has a very close friend. Another king. They say that if you kill the daughter he treasures most, do you really think he won't come after you?" Hearing this, cold sweat formed on the queen's face. She hadn't expected Sophie to be this forceful. But it was nothing more than momentary shock. To avoid future trouble, she immediately ordered Sophie to be executed on the spot. The two soldiers drew their blades in unison and swung straight towards Sophie. As the blades were about to fall upon Sophie's slender body, the little princess finally snapped. Her father was still lying on a sickbed, his life uncertain, and now someone was trying to take her mother consort's life as well. Consumed by rage, the little princess entered a red-eyed berserk state. When the dust settled, she was seen floating in midair. Sophie was crouched on the ground, gasping for breath. Before she could even recover, the princess seized her by the throat and shouted, "What? Are you trying to kill Sophie too? If you want her dead, then I'll kill you first." Meanwhile, inside the palace council chamber, all the ministers had gathered. Hilly stood in the center, surrounded like a criminal under interrogation. Listening to her testimony, the ministers remained skeptical, none daring to take a stance. Suddenly, a piercing scream shattered the solemn atmosphere. The crowd followed the sound to a nearby room. Pushing the door open, they saw the little princess gripping Sophie's neck tightly. The queen was curled up in the corner, trembling in fear. Seeing this, Hilly rushed to the queen's side and asked anxiously, "Your Majesty, what happened? How did you get hurt like this?"